The morning light felt soft as it poured through the narrow hotel window. Daniel stood in front of the mirror and tried to steady his breathing. His tie hung loose around his neck and his palms were warm with nerves. He had waited years to feel this kind of hope again. A quiet life as a single father had taught him to be careful with his heart, yet here he was only an hour away from the moment he thought would change everything. His son Noah sat on the carpet, swinging his feet while watching a cartoon on mute. Daniel kept glancing at him, as though the boy could keep the world in order simply by being there. In many ways he had. After his wife passed away, Noah had become the center of every choice Daniel made. When he met Clara, he had been surprised by how naturally she fit around their little world. She was gentle with Noah and steady with Daniel. She talked about their futures in a way that made him feel chosen rather than settled for. His phone buzzed on the table. He almost ignored it until he noticed the unknown number. The message contained a single video. No text. No explanation. Just a video that made his stomach rise into his throat. He replayed it 3 times before he could breathe again. The woman in the clip looked like Clara, though the light was dim and the camera shaky. There she stood in a crowded room with her friends cheering around her. She was laughing at something someone said. Then she slipped off her top with casual boldness while a stranger raised a glass and shouted. The clip cut off before anything else could be seen. Daniel felt cold all at once. He sank onto the foot of the bed while the room began to tilt. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't the insecurity he once knew when trying to date again. This was confusion layered over something that felt deeper and sharper. He had believed she cherished the quiet life he was offering. He had believed she understood the weight of being part of a small unit made of 2 people who had already lost enough. He looked at Noah, who was now watching him with wide, patient eyes. Daniel forced a smile and stroked the boy's hair. He tried to steady himself. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was old. Maybe it wasn't even her. Clara had told him her friends insisted on a small bachelorette gathering with dinner and a few games. She promised nothing extreme. He trusted her without demanding details. Now he wondered if that trust had been misplaced. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Clara's sister telling him the driver was on his way to pick him up for the ceremony. The timing felt cruel. He told her he needed a moment. Then he stood and paced until the walls felt too close. He decided he couldn't walk down that aisle blind. He needed truth, even if it shattered everything he hoped for. He asked his neighbor, who had flown in for the wedding, to sit with Noah. Then he stepped into the hallway and made his way to the room where Clara was getting ready. He paused outside the door and listened. He heard soft voices, laughter, the rustle of someone adjusting their dress. When he knocked, everything fell silent. Clara opened the door with a smile he had always found gentle. It faded as soon as she saw his face. She pulled him inside, asking if something happened to Noah. He shook his head and handed her the phone. She watched the clip with a slow stiffening of her posture. When it ended, she closed her eyes and held the phone against her chest. "That isn't me," she whispered. It was the stillness in her voice that made him believe she wasn't lying. She explained that years ago, before she even met him, she had a friend named Mara who looked remarkably similar to her. They were often confused for each other in photos. The two had drifted apart after a terrible argument, one that ended with blocked numbers and no desire to reconnect. Daniel felt torn between relief and uncertainty. He wanted to believe her completely, yet the video hovered in his mind like a shadow. Clara took his hand and led him toward her vanity where a stack of old pictures sat in a small wooden box. She sorted through them and handed him a photo of her and Mara at AB. The resemblance was undeniable. Same height. Same smile. Same brown hair that curled naturally when damp. Clara explained that Mara had once dated the man who appeared in the background of the clip. The breakup had not been kind. Clara suspected Mara or someone close to her might have sent the video to ruin the wedding out of spite. It was a theory that felt both wild and strangely plausible. Daniel sat across from her and watched her face. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't angry. She simply looked hurt that something from her past had crawled its way into their future. For the first time since receiving the message, Daniel felt his heart ease. Not because the confusion vanished, but because he recognized the honesty in her expression. He had learned to read people carefully since becoming a father. He knew what weighed someone down and what freed them. Clara looked burdened, not guilty. He reached for her hand and told her he wished she had shared more about this old friendship, even if it seemed insignificant at the time. She admitted she kept quiet because she thought it would never matter again. She apologized. The words were soft but sincere. They sat together long enough for the quiet to settle. Then Clara's mother peeked in and asked if everything was all right. Clara nodded and squeezed Daniel's hand. There was no rush, yet they both knew they needed to make a choice. Daniel stood and told her he still wanted to marry her. Not because he ignored what happened, but because he believed her. Because trust wasn't something he wanted to abandon the moment it was shaken. She stepped into his arms and held him with relief that warmed the room. When they finally walked out together, the wedding party looked puzzled but relieved to see them side by side. Daniel fetched Noah and carried him to the car. The boy wrapped his arms around his father's neck, unaware of the storm that had passed. The ceremony ran a little late, yet no one complained. As Clara walked down the aisle toward him, Daniel felt something settle inside him. Love wasn't about perfect certainty. It was about choosing to stay even when fear tugged at the edges. He caught her smile and knew he had chosen right.